This is something I haven't actually done yet on this channel, but I thought I would now because I found something posted online that was an occurrence in MechWarrior that I found intriguing, and even creepy. Whether or not it's even true, well, you know how these internet urban legends are, but I thought I'd report on it anyways. A player was sitting at his desk late at night, playing MechWarrior 5 Mercenaries. He had been enjoying the game for a few hours already, running missions and managing his lance of giant mechs. Everything felt normal until one strange mission changed his experience. The mission started like any other. The player had chosen a heavy mech and was leading his lance through a forested map. The trees were tall and the atmosphere in the game was darker than usual. He noticed the fog was thicker than normal, but he thought this was just part of the game's design. At first, there was nothing unusual. He fought some enemy mechs, destroyed a few tanks, and began walking through the trees to reach the next objective marker. That was when the first odd thing happened. Out of nowhere, the player heard a sound. It was not like the usual weapons fire, explosions, or radio chatter that he was used to in MechWarrior 5. Instead, it was a low, rumbling noise that seemed to come from far away, like something very large is moving. The sound was strange because it did not match anything in the game's normal library of audio. It also did not loop or repeat the way most game sounds do. It seemed natural, uneven, almost like breathing mixed with static. The player paused, unsure if his headset was glitching, or if maybe there was interference from something in his room. He muted the game for a second and listened to the room around him. His computer was the only thing making noise. He unmuted the game, and the strange sound continued for a moment, then stopped. At first, he thought it was just some odd audio bug. Games sometimes have weird sound issues, and he assumed this was no different. But still, something about it made him feel uneasy. He continued the mission, keeping an ear out for the noise. A few minutes later, while moving his mech between clusters of trees, the player thought he saw something. In the distance, behind the tree line, a dark shape moved. At first, he thought it might be an enemy mech, but as he looked closer, he realized it did not look like anything he had seen before. It was huge, towering above the trees, and for a moment he thought it was at least twice the size of an Atlas, which is already one of the largest mechs in the game. The shape seemed to glide rather than walk, and it was darker than the shadows around it. The player blinked and tried to focus, but the shape disappeared before he could get a clear look. This left him confused. He checked the radar display, but nothing showed up. There were no enemy signals, no units nearby, nothing at all. He wondered if his eyes were just playing tricks on him. Sometimes, when you stare at a screen for a long time, shadows and shapes can blur together. But still, the image of something massive moving through the forest stayed in his mind. He pushed forward, trying to finish the mission. The game felt different after that moment. Every time he turned his mech, he thought he saw something in the corner of his vision, but it was gone as soon as he looked. The trees seemed darker, and the fog seemed heavier. He began to feel a sense of dread that he had never felt in the game before. He knew MechWarrior 5 was not a horror game, but the atmosphere now felt more like one. Then it happened again. As he moved toward the next waypoint, he caught sight of the dark figure once more. This time it was clearer, and it definitely looked too big to be any mech in the game. It seemed to shift and bend, not solid like a machine, but more like a shadow. It stood for only a second before melting back into the fog and vanishing again. The player's heart began to race. He leaned closer to his monitor, searching for signs of what it could be. Again, nothing appeared on the radar. The mission briefing had never mentioned any giant enemy or special event. He began to wonder if maybe his game had been modified somehow, but he had never downloaded any mods. His copy of MechWarrior 5 was standard, bought through a normal store. There was no reason for there to be extra content. That made him more uneasy, because if it was not a mod, then it had to be some kind of glitch. But it was the strangest glitch he had ever seen. The strange sound returned. This time it was louder, almost like the deep growl of something huge, mixed with a static hum. It lasted longer too, almost 10 seconds, before fading into silence. The player felt a chill run down his spine. He began to rotate his mech in circles, scanning the trees, firing his weapons into the forest just to see if anything reacted. Nothing did. Everything went quiet again, except for the normal background music of the game. For the next several minutes, the mission continued, but the player could not focus. He was too distracted by the thought that something was watching him. Every time the leaves on the trees moved, he thought it was the shadow coming back. Every time the fog shifted, he thought he saw its outline. Yet, nothing appeared again. Finally, he reached the final part of the mission. Just as he was about to complete it, the screen froze. At first, the freeze seemed like a simple lag spike, but then the sound returned once more, very loud this time, and it almost drowned out the normal game audio. It felt like it was pressing against his ears. Then, suddenly, the screen went black. His entire game crashed to desktop with no error message. The player sat staring at the empty desktop, his heart racing. The strange sound was gone. The shadow was gone. The game was gone. He tried to relaunch MechWarrior 5, but for some reason it refused to start immediately. After a few attempts, it finally loaded, but nothing seemed unusual. There were no new missions, no new enemies, and nothing in the menus to explain what had happened. It was as if the entire experience had never occurred, but the memory of the strange sound and the massive shadow in the trees stayed with him. Later, he looked online to see if anyone else had ever reported the same issue. He found many discussions about common bugs in MechWarrior 5, like crashes, sound glitches, and texture problems, but there were no reports of a giant shadow twice the size of an atlas moving in the forest. There were no mentions of the strange rumbling growl that did not belong to any weapon or machine. No one else seemed to have experienced what he had. This left him with two possibilities. Either his game had suffered a rare and creepy bug that no one else had ever documented, or he had seen something that was never supposed to be there. Both ideas unsettled him. Games are built from code, and bugs usually follow patterns, but what he saw and heard did not feel like a normal error. It felt like something had broken through the game world for just a moment, leaving behind a trace of something unknown. The player never saw the shadow again. He continued to play MechWarrior 5 on other nights, and everything seemed normal. Yet, he could not forget that night when the forest map seemed to come alive with something darker than the game was meant to contain. The sound, the shadow, and the crash became a story he told to friends, though most of them just laughed and said it was probably a glitch. He agreed with them out loud, but inside he still wondered if it was something else. Whether it was a bug, a hallucination, or something stranger, the experience stood out as one of the creepiest moments he had ever had in a video game. MechWarrior 5 was not supposed to be scary, but for that one night, it became something far more unsettling. The sound that was not part of the game, the shadow larger than an atlas, and the sudden crash all came together to create a moment he would never forget.